Mm. Hello, everybody. Today we can discuss the very important topics that the engineer needs to know. That topic is about laws. My name is Nopal Liprichanon. I'm an electrical engineer. Later, I earned some other degrees in political science, Master of Political Science, and Bachelor of Laws. And I'm also um, working at the um, Council of Engineer as Inspector General, which is a position that I was selected from um, the, the members of the engineers of Thailand. I am currently with the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering, Thammasat University, right? And let's see what we gonna discuss today about that. So let us start with the introductions of the law. So as we familiar with the law today in Thailand, the law that's used in Thailand is a written law, and the written law is types of the civil law, and that we use the court law system. However, for the world or around the globe, there are two types of the law system. The first system we call common law, normally used in the UK and the Commonwealth nations and um, the United States of America. And the civil law systems generally used in Germany, France, Japan, and also Thailand. The distinction between the common law and civil law is that the common laws doesn't have the written form. They judge the problem of the society by the common sense. So that's why they call the common law. But the civil law, they based on the written system law, they need to write the law first, and then whatever happened, the fact that we brought into the court, we gonna judge with um, the law that written in the court. So basically, the civil law is a written law, and in Thailand we use the written law. And let's see where is the source of the written law in Thailand. The source of the written law in Thailand come from three major sources. The first sources come from the legislature based on the parliamentary member discussion. Right? There are three types of the law that come from the parliament. The first one is the Organic Act. The Organic Act actually is deliberative descriptions of the Constitution, in which we don't want to amend the Constitution frequently. So what would be changes in the future? They would do it in the Organic Act. The second one is the Act. The Act is the law that we know in general. What we call law actually is the Act. The Act actually comes from the bill that maybe government or the member of parliament or anyone based on the Constitution's definitions allow them to draft the bill. The bill will be brought into the parliament, and the member of parliament will discuss about it and maybe set up the parliamentary committee to discuss in depth about it. Sometimes they do the proper hearing and then bring back to the parliament and then make a final vote and issues and enact the act at the end of the day. So the act will play the great role for the people. Any laws that we know about, law that we enforce the people's actually is the act level. The third one is the course of law. Course of law is a kind of written law system. It's a kind of systematic written description that bring all the issues regarding the criminal, civil, commercial laws into the systematic fashion. The code of law is very important because today what we gonna rely on the law actually basically come from the code of law. There are two types of code of law. The one is criminal law, and the second one is the civil and commercial law. Right? The level of the code of law is the same level as the act and the organic act. Right? Second source of the written law in Thailand, established by the executive or by the government. When we talk about emergency decree, for example, the law that will determine the situation that would be very emergency, like COVID, for example, when the COVID pandemic is spread very fast, the government need to use the law that have to be enforced so fast, so they cannot really wait until the parliament member, the representative in the parliament, issue the act to apply to enforce the situation, so that the government or the executive would enact the emergency decree unless the king approve and signs. Then this type of law can be applied to the nation. Actually, the emergency decree later can become the act once this type of law can apply for the longer term, so that the level of the law actually is the same as the act, but just come from the different sources from the beginning. But if they would like to change the emergency decree to be the act, they can do it later. Another type of the law we call decree. The decree is also established by the executive or the government, and normally in general it's a law that they will show the relationship between the government and the parliament, and in which the level of this type of law is lower than the act. And the ministerial regulations is also established by the executive. Normally they would brought the issues in the ministry level to specify to solve some specific problem. And the third source of the laws is set by the local administrations. So there are provincial ordinance, municipality ordinance, district regulations, Bangkok's Metropolitan Administration Ordinance, and also some others local law, maybe the issues by the city of Pattaya, the city of Phuket, for example. Among these types of law, acts play the greatest role in our real life and would, of course, involve directly with the engineers. So what does it mean by the act? Act is a bill which has passes through the various legislative steps required for it and which has become law. Of course, the bill will be brought into the discussion with in the parliament. The parliament will appoint the parliamentary committee, and we discuss these issues maybe 2 or 3 months, or sometimes it could last for half a year. Depends on the type and the sensitivity of the issues. But sometimes it can be very quick as well. The act protects and keeps the public interest. So act is the most important law that we meet every day. As we are engineers, The act that involved directly with us is the Engineer Act. The engineering professions today is regulated and controlled by the Council of Engineers. And the Council of Engineers set by the Engineer Act 1999. Of course, the number of 1999 is the year of the establishment of this act. And this act has the authorities and the responsibilities as shown in the slides. There are six issues, six topics about this act. The first one is the authorities of this act can issue the engineer license for the qualified engineers. Everyone who like to work as a professional engineer need to request for the engineering licenses. Of course, only one that can issue this is the Council of Engineers. The second authority and responsibility is to suspend or revoke the issued license. Once when you today as engineering students become a real engineer, so if you work and practice in the wrong way, lack of knowledge, and of course they will set up the committee they call the ethical committee to investigate the situation and finally found that you are not supposed to be an engineer later, so they can suspend you, or can revoke that issued license. The third authority is to certify the engineering curriculum that used in the engineering school. Of course, that curriculums have to be the curriculum that only require the engineering licenses for the graduates. They would not interfere every curriculums. They just interested in the particular curriculum that would give the degree to the graduates and would be eligible for requesting the license from the Council of Engineers after they graduate from the school or from the university. The fourth authority is certifying of engineering professions knowledge and expertise. Sometimes we need to improve our knowledge. We need to gain some more knowledge outside university later afterward. So all of the knowledge that we learn from can be certified from the Council of Engineers as well. The fifth authority is to suggest the Minister of Interior who regulate the Council of Engineers regarding the establishment and the cancellations of the professional practice in engineering. Definitely, if someone would did something wrong against the law and deserve to be revoked and the license can be cancelled, of course the Council of Engineers can suggest the minister to cancel the professional practice in engineering as well. And the last authority and responsibility of the Council of Engineers is to issue any regulations that involve with all engineers under the professional practice in engineering. Under the Engineer Act, what you must know about this is the Ethics Committee that works under the Engineer Act 1999. The authority of the Ethics Committee can bring the engineering ethics on tail if anyone did some things that seems to be wrong, and um, the issues can be brought on trail by the ethics committee. Of course, that case would affect to the engineer who behave seriously unethical, and if they give the verdicts and the results show that, of course, they already done the unethical issues, that engineer may give a 5 years license suspension or license revocation later. Let's see a case study that come from the Ethics Committee under the Engineer Act 1999. So this case is happened with the Engineer A. The Engineer A granted an engineering profession license in mechanical engineering and has signs to certify the safety of the use of the boiler factory, but there are witnesses confirming that the boiler was not actually inspected. With the engineer has explained the characteristic of the boiler, the algorithms, and the tools used in the inspection. This engineer chose confusions and could not explain the cause of the boiler explosion, which can result in death. Therefore, in this case, it was considered that this engineer lacked the knowledge and ability to test the boiler to be correct in accordance with the practice and technical knowledge. Therefore, the engineer was convicted to suspend his license to operate the controls engineering profession for a period of 5 years. So this is come from the Ethics Committee decisions number 1/2003, dated February 20th, 2003. Let's see the case studies from the ethical committees under the Engineering Act 1999. Number 2. This is the second case study. The engineer the engineer E granted an engineering profession license in civil engineering. The first case was mechanical engineering. This one is the civil engineering. This engineer had agreed with the company to design a construction work for a chicken processing plant. Before starting his design or his work, he traveled to see the construction site and found that about 40% of the piles had been driven, and most of which were groove needles. Therefore, it is expected that the designer has already been done. The designs have already been done and has informed the employer to notify the original designer first before he can do the work. See, he told his employer, but he did not notify the original designer by himself. Later, the engineer E received a work order from the employer and of course, because he understood that the employer has already informed the original designer and the engineer has therefore made the designs as hired, without tracking whether or not the employer has notified the original designer. So it was therefore an inappropriate behavior, because the engineer still has a duty to contact and coordinate with the original designer engineer in order to acknowledge in advance the admissions of his work. Therefore, the Ethics Committee considers to verdict that this engineer has an inappropriate behavior, right? So the penalty provisions in this case was to warn this engineer to exercise more caution in their professional practice. Luckily, the engineer just was warned by the ethics committee. His license wouldn't be suspended or revoked or cancelled. However, so this case is also a good case too, so that you guys have to be careful. So this is come from the ethics committee's decision number 7/2004, dated July 12, 2004. Now turn to see the third case study. This case study was in the first page of the newspaper in 2013, April 28. So in the case of the 200th anniversary of the Somport Krung Ratanakosin Bridge, this is a pedestrian crossing bridge located in Tha Luang, Tha Rua, Panakhon Sri provinces. This pedestrian crossing bridge collapsed on April 28, 2013, and that caused the death of a 10-year-old girl, who is the daughter of Mr. Nukna Sua Saming. So in this case, Mr. Anunak brought the issue into the ethical committee of the Council of Engineers. Under this case, there are two engineers that involved with this case, Mr. Anuwat and Mr. Satnitam. They was granted the licenses as associate engineer from the Council of Engineers, which is the lowest level of the engineering license. There are three levels. First one is we call the associate engineer. The second level is general engineer, and the third level, or the highest level, is a professional engineer. In Thai, we call the associate engineer is Paki Visawakor. The second level is a general engineer, we call Saman Visawakor. The third level is a professional engineer, we call Wutti Visawakor. So these two guys was granted the license as associate engineer from the COE, which has no control over the construction of the bridge. The one who can do it have to be at least a general engineer or up. But this guy has granted only the associate engineer and has no control over the construction of the bridge, with a range of more than 12 meters. We can do some things less than that. They can do some things lower than that. In such case, only the general engineers or higher level is allowed to supervise the construction of the bridge structures. But these two guys breached the law by performing and take actions to supervise the construction of the bridge structure of the pedestrian crossings, which has the range of more than 12 meters. So the two engineers were verdicted to suspend his license to operate the controls engineer profession for a period of 5 years too. Let's take a look at another case study, which is very interesting because this case study involved with another law or another act, so-called the Building Control Act 2. Let's see what happened. The engineer D. Granted an associate engineer license in civil engineering, has contracted to renovate and add a 4-story commercial buildings without applying for a buildings modification permit with a local official. With the laws, the Building Control Act or building control law state that if the engineer would like to renovate or modify the building, they need to ask permission from the local official. Okay, but this guy, right, did not do that. During the construction process, the employer has requested to verbally change the work in addition to what is stated in the contract. The contract doesn't ask him to do something like this. No writing notification such as adding roof extension work and build bathrooms in the top floor, for example, having buried a 4-inch pipe from the 4th floor down to the bottom floor before starting the construction, and later made extractions of the beam surface around the embedded pipe to connect the pipe. This seems to be right. So these engineers seem to be done the correct practice in terms of technical sense or technical process. But the employer understood that the engineer drills the beam to bury the pipe. The ethics committee therefore has considered the fact that the engineer made the designs and calculated in the right step in terms of engineering's knowledge. He has no problem. He did that by burying a 4-inch drain pipe before construction, and it was considered that he performed the work correctly, according to practice and technical theory or practice. But the engineer acknowledged prior to the work that the building could not apply for a permit to be modified and hence violate the Building Control Act. So this is the key. He did the right step in the technical practice, but he did something wrong. He did the wrong things that violate the Building Control Act, because he has been acknowledged before he started work that this building hasn't asked for the permit to renovate or modify, but he still accepts to perform this work. Of course, this is considered to encourage illegal conduct. So therefore, it is deemed appropriate to penalize the suspension of this engineer license for a period of 6 months. This is a decision from the Ethics Committee, number 9/2005, dated April 25th, 2005. This is a case study of the ethics of the engineering professions from the Council of Engineers. The case studies that we have discussed earlier was involved only with the ethical issues. But however, under the Engineering Act, there are the penalty provisions that you have to be careful and try to do not violate it. There are many issues that engineers have to be careful, because if you violate this law, the violation of the Engineering Act is subject to both civil and criminal penalties. If the actions is not only on the ethical issue, and if it involves in the higher step that involve with the civils and the criminal levels. So you need to pay, you need to be punished, sometime to be in prison, so to be in jail. So they are both imprisonment and fine. For example, engaging in engineering profession without permission. So if you are not an engineer, for example, if you do not complete engineering degree, or even you completed but you did not apply for the license, or even you apply for it, you did not be granted for the license, you cannot engage in engineering profession if you do not have the permission. If you do so, you are violating the engineer law, and that's subject to civil and criminal penalties. You can be fined and you can be in jail too. And under the section 71, a fine not exceed 6,000 baht or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 3 years, or can be both. So these penalties will be applied to engineers who commit violation. It depends on the degree of the actions that you did. So the judge will make this decision. It's not the ethical committee. So you need to be on trial in the court instead of the trials in the ethical committee. So you have to step into the higher level if you perform the violations, and that penalty provisions will enforce you. So apart from the engineer law or engineer act, there are several laws that engineers should know. So the closest and most related law that involve with you or with the engineer is the labor protection law, and this come from the Labor Protection Act, be it 25 or 41, be it the Buddhist era. Okay, so this law would ensure the fair use of the labor and provide protection for the workers. And there are sections specifically for the females and child labor as well. So once when you become an engineer or works in a factory or in any places that involve with people, so if you are the person that who supervise the group of people to work, you need to be careful about the female labor and child labor. So if you are engineer, even you are not the entrepreneur or the owner, so you can be violated the law too. So if your work it has a direct responsibility to them. So this law also involves with the wage or salary. For example, that overtime payment can be fair or not, and the welfare have to be fair. And what is involved with the engineer directly is on the safety and working environment. So the safety and working environments need to be under control by this law. And you, as an engineer, for example, like a IE engineer, industrial engineering, many of you, when you graduate, you work in the safety department, or maybe some of the civil engineer working in the environment, maybe in charge for the environment of of your job. So maybe you need to understand this law too, because this is related directly to many of you. So the key description of the labor protection laws are the use of the labor in general case. So the laws state that the working times have to be not over 8 hours per day, and working up to 48 hours per week, and have to stop working at least 1 day per week. Oh, definitely. They have the overtime system above this period of time of working. So the owner have to pay the extra wage or salary to the worker. And the law also specifies the female labor. For example, the female do not work on the scaffolding at 10 meters above the ground. Many construction sites use a female worker. So the law to protect the female and do not allow the female to work in the dangerous places, like working on the scaffolder at 10 meters above the ground. And pregnant women are prohibited from working between 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. So this intention actually was specified for the baby of that woman too, not only the woman herself, because they believe that if they work after 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., it's not healthy to the baby as well, and it's also not healthy to the girl and to the woman. And then this law will determine the pregnant woman to take up to 90 days off from work after they deliver the baby. And the law will protect women. So the owner or entrepreneur cannot terminate a woman due to the pregnancy. So we move to the factory law. The factory laws have the objective to supervise the establishments and operations of the factory and state the assortment of the factory. And so you can know that how many types of factories by law. So you should know. And the law will set the rule and the requirements that each type of factory must meet. So this is authority, the objective of the factory law. So the factory law also states the composition of the factory. By law, the factory consists of 4 elements. So if you would like to define what does it mean by factories by law, there are 4 elements to be considered. The first element is there is factory building, a location or vehicle for operation. The second element of the factory by law is using 5 horsepower or equivalent power of 5 horsepower or more, or having 7 or more workers with or without machinery. So if there is a second element occurs, so it can be defined at the factory too. The third element is to produce, assemble, pack, repair, maintenance, test, improve, transform, transport, store, or destroy anything. And the fourth element is, according to the type of the factory prescribed in the current ministerial regulations, There are 107 types under this regulation. For this regulation is issues under the authority defined by the Factory Act. I'm guaranteed that many of you after graduates, many of you would work in the factory too. So that you need to understand and have the knowledge of the liability of an engineer under the factory law. The engineers must share the responsibility and liability together with the entrepreneur or the owner of the factory. In case when the entrepreneur commits an offense, by law it is considered that an engineer who works in the factory and has direct responsibility and authority that involved with the committed offense must get the same punishment as the owner of the factory as well. So once you work in the factory, so you need to be careful. For example, when you are asked to responsible for controlling a machine, for example, right? And if that machine will be used for the drug production, so this is a good example, right? Even you work in the factories only on that machine, right? But of course, you must share the responsibility and liability together with the owner too. By law, because it is considered that you works in that factory and had the direct responsibility and authority that involved with the committed offense, because that machine produce the drug. That machine is a tool for the offense, to get the offense. You also have the direct responsibility and authority to that machine which involved with the committed offense machine. So you have to be careful. It depends on the fact that actually you know it or not. It doesn't matter, but you need to be careful on such in such example case. Let us take a look at the important laws that involve with more civil engineer, mechanical engineer, and electrical engineer. This is the buildings control law. Many of these engineers that I mentioned would involve directly with this law because they tend to have the career of the design, supervise, construct the building, and of course one day you can become a consultant or even the owner or contractor. So this career would involve with this law directly. The objective under the Building Control Act, BE 2522, is to control the construction of the buildings to be stable, strong, and safe. This involved directly with the construction engineer. And to make it neat and beautiful. Of course, they do not want the engineer or anyone to make the buildings to be dangerous, to be messy. And another objective is to control the quality of the environment of that building. There is a need to have the good environmental quality management of the building to ensure the healthiness of the people working, living in that building in the future too. So, under this building control law, before you start to construct the building, you need to perform the application for the building construction to get the permission first. If your construction sites lies on the following descriptions, when you would like to modify the buildings from the 5 square meters or more, you must apply for a license or permission. There are 2 options to do so. The first option is apply for a license or permit from the local government officer. This is stated in the section 2021 to obtain a permit before the construction can be made. If you do not use this option, you can select the other option. If you have the drawing plan, if you have the construction plan or drawing, you don't need to apply for a permit, but you inform the local government officer and attach it with the construction plan or drawing instead of submitting an application for a permit. So this is stated in the section 39 bits under the Building Control Act. However, if you select the second option, the law states that there must be a signature. There must be signatures of the building designer that come from the professional engineer and architects. So it depends on the fields of that construction's plan or drawing. So if that drawing involves civil engineering, there must be the signature from the civil engineer. If there are a boiler or air conditions, chiller installed, they must have the signature from the mechanical engineer. If there are lighting protection, if they got the load center distribution center of electrical supply to that building too. The construction plans or drawing must also have the signature from electrical engineer. So if there are the signatures to confirm that drawing and that plan was designed from the professional engineer or from the general engineer that licensed by the Council of Engineers, you can choose the second option. So once you inform, so the construction can be done. So you don't have to apply for the permission if you choose this option. So once the construction permit is granted, or after you submit or attach the drawing plan and inform the local government officer already, so you can start to the process of the construction. But the law will determine that the law will define that the constructions of all types of the building must have supervisor at all times, and the supervisor can be anyone, but must be engineer. Can be anyone, but he must be engineer if the building determined by the Engineer Act is categorized as a control engineer profession work. Right? You have to distinguish between supervisor that can work in anything if their works is not under the control by the Engineer Act and is not categorized as a control engineering profession work. So it can be anyone. But that supervisor must be only engineer if that building is determined by the Engineer Act. That work is categorized as control engineer profession work only. So the name of the supervisor must be notified, must be declared. Everybody have to know, you have to have the size, the board, and you let people in the public know who is the supervisor. So you can notice that when you see the construction site anywhere, you can see that the chartboard, and they can they give the details of the construction site, budget, and also state the name of the supervisor to control that site too. So apart from the Building Control Act, so there are other laws that related to the building control and related to the engineers. So the ministerial regulations that related to engineer and the building control law are the followings. There are three ministerial regulations: BE 2526 number 4, Ministerial Regulation BE 2535 number 33, and Ministerial Regulations BE 2526 number 6, in which it prescribes the rule, procedures, conditions for construction, standard, safety, measure for the people, which is in the number 4 of the Ministerial Regulations BE 2526, and prescribe the structure and equipment which are components of the high-rise building and the large buildings that determined in the number 33 under the Ministerial Regulation BE 2535, and determining the load capacity for various force units to calculate the design of a building structure resistance, stability, characteristics, and properties of material used in the construction. That's stated under number 6 of the Ministerial Regulations BE 2527. So these regulations must be references when you would like to work, design, or practice under this description. So you need to understand that it involves this kind of law too. Ministerial regulation is the lower level from the act issued by the ministry, not issues or established by the parliamentary committee or the parliament legislator. Another ministerial regulations related to the engineer is to prescribing forms and methods relating to the installations of the fire protection system, lighting, ventilation system, electrical energy distribution system. This is defined in the number 39 under Ministerial Regulation BE 3537. This is very important, and that mechanical and electrical engineer must know. This is the M&E regulation. The M&E have to know this, right? Remember number 39, Ministerial Regulation BE 3537. And under the number 55 of the Ministerial Regulation BE 3543, it defines the shape of the building area of space that is proportional to the availability of the residential buildings must be at least 30%. So this is a kind of the interior design, right? And the architecture. Normally, architect needs to have these informations in conjunction of the design of the building. Okay, you need to allocate the plenty space to ensure the safety or comfortability of the people who work or live there. Building control laws is one of the very important laws because they are related to many other laws, such as the city planning law, engineer law, environmental law, highway law, etc. And in applying building control law, so an engineer must know other relevant laws as well. So that why today we discuss many types of the law. Then we start from the engineer law. So we're gonna talk about the city planning law later. So this involved directly with the building control law, which is the major law of engineering practice. So the law sets the penalty and at the several levels too, that you need to be careful. The penalty provisions of this building control law is very, very significant. So construction without permission is one of that issues that can be penalized. Right? The construction of the buildings is different from the layouts plan that is permitted. You need to be careful. So do not try to modify the building that is different from the layout plan that you are submitted to the local officer, okay, a local government officer. Remember that you have to ask for permission, or you need to submit the drawing plan and inform the local government official before you construct the building. Therefore, if you modify it and do it something different from what you have already attached to them, so you are subject to be penalized, and you are liable to an imprisonment for not exceeding 3 months, or a fine not exceeding 60,000 baht, or to both fines and imprisonment. And you need to pay additional of 10,000 baht fine per day during the periods of the violation, or until the provisions are accurately complied. So the last one is very important. If you do not stop doing that, you have to be fined. In addition of the base fine of 60,000 baht and imprisonment, you need to pay in addition of 10,000 baht fine per day during the periods of the violation until the provisions are accurately complied, or you stop doing so, or you do something correct under the law. Okay, another important law is the cartels law, which is the law that involves the bidding to the government agencies. For many of you, after you graduate, sometimes you work as a contractor, or you may be a seller or trader to bid to the government agencies. And if you are against this law, so you can be imprisoned too. You have to be careful. This law is very, very strong. And the objective of this law is to prevent the collusion in the bid to provide goods or services to government agencies that will cause damage to the nation. And to determine the nature of the offense and the mechanism for prosecuting political position holders and government officers. Of course, this law have related to the other laws too. The offenses relating to the building to government relating to bidding to government agency act BE 2542. This is the major act, major law. This is the administrative measure on the Corruption Prevention and Suspension of the Corruption Act, BE 2551. So these are two relevant laws that the judge will bring these two laws to consider together. As Guy says, the penalty provision of this category is very strong. Any person who has a duty to approve and recognize such a bid that violate the law and refrains from cancelling the bid as offense for the abandonment of the duty. So the liable for these offenses is to imprisonment of 1 to 10 years and a fine of 20,000 baht. And another committed offenses is whoever commits corruption by designing, fixing, pricing, conditions, benefit in a bid, or assisting with the right to enter into a state contract. So the liability for these committed offenses is to imprison for 5 to 10 years or life. Life means you cannot get out. And the fines of 1 to 200,000 baht. It is very strong. You have to be careful. So the point that involved directly with the engineer is here, designing. So many engineer in the future can be a designer or can be the one who has authority to design, to fix, and to set the price estimation, to set the conditions, set the specification, and if that involves directly to get a benefit in a bid that existing some another person, a third party person, to enter the state contract and to make the damage to the nation, of course, it would lie on the committed offenses under this law. So you have to be careful. Your duty, your responsibility would involve this case too in the future. Another type of the law is the civil, commercial, and criminal law related to the engineering profession. Of course, on the course of law or the course law system, there are two types of law. First one is civil and commercial law, which is the private law defines the freedom between the private and the private sector. For example, trading between buyers and sellers had nothing to do with the others, so the state should not intervene. So this involved only on the civil and criminal law. But the criminal law involved the public. So this is a public law establishes the relationship between the state or government agency and its citizens to enforce the conduct, the behavior of the people within the state. So the one who commit offenses will have the penalty provisions in the criminal laws related to the engineering professions, which is determined in under section 227 of the criminal law, state that a person with the design, control, or construction profession fails commonly with the rule or procedures. So this causes danger to other persons such as the buildings, supervision engineer, and a scaffolds, or the pedestrian, injured, etc. They must be imprisoned, not exceeding 5 years, or fine exceeding 10,000 baht or both. So these sections of the criminal law will involve you directly. We move to the urban planning law. The urban planning law have the objective to force according to city planning, urban plannings, and urban developments only to create a healthy, comfortable, beautiful, and orderly land use and public safety. So the urban planning law description would have the objective for the planning, preparing and enforcing the overall city plan, and it is a ministerial regulation which is enforced for no more than 5 years. So this third law is a ministerial regulation, not the act. So when it expires, then the announcement of the new editions cannot be made. They need to issue another new one. And this can be extended up to 2 times, each time not exceeding 1 year. And this regulation establishing and enforcing a specific city plan. And enact, of course, we can enact as an act too, and that act shall be enforced for not more than 5 years. The city plan law is very important because there is a need to be sure that all the environments, all the plans of the location that the building have to be planned, have to be constructed, have to be healthy, safety, under this regulation. It is a city plan of the Bangkok metropolitan area. So in many countries, the devise the plans of the city to be zone like residential zone, business zone, industrial zone. But in Bangkok, we did not plan for such example from the beginning. But in the future, if the engineer or the architects have followed that regulations strictly, so the city plan would be nice, safe and healthy to live. Another important law is the Energy Conservation Promotion Law, which have the objective to require the owners of the controlled buildings and factories to implement energy conservation plans and set energy conservation criteria. The definition is to a controlled building that are buildings that use electricity from 1000 kilowatt or 1175 kVA or more, or a controls plant in the factory that use electricity from 1000 kilowatt or 1175 kVA or more. The energy conservation and promotion is very important because they would promote the use of the energy and to try to conserve energy to be safe, and that would encourage the owner and the engineer to follow the law, and therefore we need to know about the type and the size of the buildings that need to be designed for energy conservation, include the constructions of the modification of the buildings which combine floor areas of 2000 square meters or more. Of course, that would be applied for the new buildings and the modified building too. So these 9 types of the buildings are like hospitals or sanatoriums under the law on the sanatoriums, such as hospital. The second type is the school. The third one is the office. The fourth one is condominium under the law of the condominium. The fifth one is the buildings for assembly of the people under the building control law. The sixth one is the theater buildings under the building control law, following by hotel buildings according to the hotel law. The eighth types and size of the building is the service facilities building under the law on the service facility. And the last type is the buildings, department store, or shopping center. Some engineer works involved with the petrol business. So therefore, there is a flow control law to control the work and the operation of the fields too. The objective of this law is to control the business of fuel oil, liquefied petroleum, gas and natural gas to be effective, and protect the people to have safety in terms of the prevention and danger to life and the people's property. And this may arise from the storage packaging, and transportations, and distribution of the fuel. And the fuel oil refers to the natural gases, liquefied petroleum gas, crude oil, gasoline, aviation fuel too, that the fuel that fuel the aeroplane, kerosene, diesel, fuel oil, and lubricants. And the oil means crude oil. When you talk about oil, you mean crude oil. Gasolines, aviation fuels, kerosene, diesel, fuel oil, lubricants, and other oils as prescribed by the minister. And the liquefied petroleum gas is a petroleum gas containing either propane, butane, isobutane, or butylenes in combination. And under the control operations of the fuels, of course, based on the Section 17 of the Fuel Oil Control Act, BE 2542, it is divided into three categories. Category 1 is a business that can be operated immediately. And the second category is a business that must be notified to the competent official or the local government officer before undertaking the operation to the business that may cause moderate danger. And the third category is a business that requires a license before operating, which is the business that may cause serious harm. So if you would like to set up a business that involves with the fuel, so you need to check whether which categories your business will be before setting up that business. So the computer law. The computer law is very important and it's played a great role and we are so close to it very much because we play computer every day, right? All information, technology are close to us. So you need to be careful and seriously study this law. So the objective of this computer law is to define the details of the offense in the use of the information system and the penalties of the perpetrator. The perpetrators must take into account the consequences. And in addition of the 2007 Computer Crimes Act, it also requires the administrator of the information system to improve the system or add some functions in the system in order to comply with the requirements of this act. So even you are not the engineer that grant the license from the Council of Engineer, if for example like computer engineering, software engineering for example, so you must be careful about your actions because any action that you take that would involve with the computer law and can commit offenses as well in any time, anywhere.